Hi, this is Meredith Lego, and I'm doing a series of videos on Ascension science, and I'm covering multiple topics that I've been able to learn through connections with different beings who have ascended past the need to reincarnate. So one of the beings is Ascended Master Hilarion, and there's some other consciousness groups or collective groups that I've connected with. Now, I've been covering recently some topics on the stages of ascension, but if you go back in history in the videos, some of them have covered the quantum field or the source field, how that interacts with consciousness, and essentially how then we start to evolve working in an extreme range of polarized energies and start to begin to come to more of a neutral point. Now that that I've finished talking about the concept of stages of ascension, I want to start to translate that into how it impacts the body and the development of different changes within the DNA over time, and what I learned about that. And Hilarion gave me sort of a good way to segue from the concept of ascension into starting to talk about the importance of light and the light body. And so to begin this kind of next chapter, if you will, in the learning process, I'll start with this one passage that I downloaded or was able to connect with him on. And so the question that I started with, it's going to kind of weave through different topics in this particular session, but it'll eventually get to the concept of light. And so I asked Hilarion, can you explain something new that I haven't learned, which can advance my knowledge and helps others? His answer, is the layers of time are founded on the principle of manifestation. Core to the structure is direction of energy resonating back and forth, free flowing, in circular directions based upon thought. So again, this is just emphasizing the idea that thought is extremely important because it essentially creates a sound vibrational frequency that again can create pattern and the development of quantum particle quantum particles. I'm probably saying it wrong now. He goes on to say that time is of the essence in the lower dimensional planes for absorption of energy lessons to occur. And why, might you ask? To return to source. Each soul yearns to go higher and higher, to get lighter and lighter, to experience a saturation of love. This is the quest. This is the journey of that all fractals are on. So again, this would be the reference to the fact, and I covered this in the last video, that we're essentially fractals of source and are sort of on that journey of returning back to the original source. Time is time is slowed for the lower vibrational energies to be released, like a valve releasing steam in a controlled way. For too much release at once would create catastrophic outcomes for the physical form. And I touched upon this in the last video, that essentially source, when you get higher in dimensional frequency and density frequency, source vibrates very, very fast. And in fact, souls eventually can essentially incarnate into stars. And so you have to imagine that if you're not sort of resonating at the right vibrational frequency, you become merged or unionized with that source frequency. It can implode you or sort of cause you to dissipate or to dissolve essentially, or to burn up because you just can't resonate at the same vibrational frequency. And that's essentially what he's saying. So right now we're in a plane of dimensional existence in which time is slowed down so that we have the ability to slowly evolve our frequency by working through different blockages in the body, especially right now, given the holographic matrix that we're in, so that we can essentially move back to that point. He goes on to say that the slowing in time allows beings to process lessons and release lower vibrational energies from the four lower bodies. So again, the four lower bodies are the emotional, the physical, the mental, and the etheric. This is like a weight being lifted from the shoulders. It is not coincidental. The term, I feel like a weight has been lifted from my shoulders, was invented to express the release of lower vibrational energies. Some attuned beings can literally feel the release and feel lighter afterwards. And I think that was a really great parallel or example that he was bringing up, because oftentimes when, let's say, something heavy is going on in your life and it's sort of past, you do feel like a weight has literally been lifted from your shoulders, and oftentimes that can be a vibrational frequency that is very heavy in your body that is releasing up out of your electromagnetic field. Then I asked him, do lower dimensional and density beings take other forms than physical bodies? For example, like plasma or gas? His answer is, all is conscious. All is energy in motion. Consciousness takes many forms through time and space in an effort to find the right suitable avatar that will maximize time to allow for more lessons and lower entropy. This explains the concept of evolution of the species. It is the innate desire to survive and thrive. The process is also spurred on or quickened through massive evolutionary shifts due to cosmic and solar energies that carry codes of light for the advancement of DNA and form. Souls contract to participate in the transmutation process of a species during these times. It is great honor and experience. All species on your planet, in all dimensions and densities, and in fact in your solar system, are going through a grand shift right now. As you learned with the studies of Dr. Peter Garyaev, structured light carries codes that have profound impacts on DNA. Gamma rays, carried from solar rays, create the greatest change because their vibrational qualities are the fastest and the largest. Humans have the ability to experience multiple timelines depending on their intention and vibration. One path can lead to the continued development of the crystalline light body. Even now, some humans on your planet carry light cells or liquid light in their plasma. Your scientists are beginning to record these discoveries. Another path or timeline is as I described before: evolution and the development of hybrid species. No path is wrong or right, for all paths offer the opportunity for source and consciousness to experience, expand, and grow. That is all for tonight. So that's essentially what he does in sort of paving the sort of transition from the idea of the stages of ascension into what's going on with the changes inside of the multiple bodies that we actually have. And so there's a couple things that he touched upon here that I think it's important to share, because it'll segue to some future videos that I do on the concept of light. So one of the things that he brought up is the concept of Dr. Peter Garyaev. And well before I channeled this, I had actually been guided to learn about this particular scientist who had understood a lot more about what light could do. Now, the way that he essentially found this out was by doing some experiments with light, with DNA, and then they were shining, I think, very structured light, like laser light, upon DNA that was in a particular, let's say, holding tank, if you will. It might have been like a small vial or something like that. But essentially, they were shining light upon that, and they noticed that when they took the DNA away, their electronic equipment that was picking up on photon signals was essentially still capturing the fact that there was a DNA strand of photons in the same space where the vial of DNA had existed before. So even though the physical remnants of the DNA had disappeared, there was sort of this phantom series of photons in the form of DNA double helix that were still hanging out in the same space. And they ended up naming this experiment, or what happened as a result of this, the DNA phantom effect. And in fact, something that was pretty interesting is that they even, I believe that they even sort of sprayed liquid nitrogen on that particular light that was there, because the light stayed for 30 days. Like, it didn't disappear. It remained in the same spot for 30 days, that photon of light. And at some point during that period of time, they sprayed liquid nitrogen on the actual light cells. And it disappeared or dissipated for a period of time, but then ended up still coming back. And what that showed Dr. Peter Garyaev, and I think another doctor called Dr. Popin, I could be saying that name wrong, but these two Russian scientists began to understand that essentially there's something about the physical matter and DNA that essentially is absorbing light into their particular, either their atoms or their quantum particles within them. And so essentially, another important thing, so that's number one. The point is that physical matter, our atoms, our DNA, our cells, the quantum particle that makes up, has the ability to absorb light. So that's really important. But why is that important? Because light is a very important carrier of codes and of information. There's a couple of great scientific experiments that have done around this, and one was referenced in this particular channel. So what he said here in this paragraph is that, as you learn from the studies of Dr. Peter Garyaev, structured light codes can have a profound effect on the DNA. Gamma rays carried from solar rays create the greatest change because their vibrational qualities are the fastest and the largest. So let me talk about another experiment that Dr. Peter Garyaev did, and he essentially became the founder of wave genetics. So because of that original understanding that he had about the DNA phantom effect, he essentially started to do different experiments with light in terms of using it to carry actual information to be used in a healing process. And he captured the light frequency coding emanating toward an egg of salamanders, and projected the same light coding into an egg of frogs. And both of these containers of like the salamander and the frog's eggs were essentially in like different hermetically sealed containers. But all he did is he basically projected, a better way for me to say it, projected laser light, laser photon from the eggs of a salamander, and passed it through into another container that was completely hermetically sealed and differentiated away from a container that had eggs from frogs. So again, he was just doing nothing more than passing the light through one set of species eggs into another species eggs. And what happened is that the frogs and their embryos essentially recoded themselves, and those frogs then had the instructions to become salamanders. So again, he essentially transferred the codes, the DNA codes, from one species to another species simply using structured light or photons, which can carry codes. Something else that he said in this paragraph was the concept of gamma rays. And I did talk about, or I did have another video in the past that talked about the concept of the rays and the spheres. And so I'll put that in the comment section below, or the description section below. But I would encourage you to watch that because it gets into how rays work. But one of the rays that actually vibrates the fastest is the gamma ray. And gamma rays, I'm just reading something that I looked up after he channeled this to me. So gamma rays are classified as ionizing radiation, as their photons have enough energy to ionize atoms, causing chemical reactions. So ionization is the process by which an atom or a molecule acquires a negative or positive charge by gaining or losing electrons, often in conjunction with other chemical changes. So that kind of gets into the concept that he brought up about the gamma rays. But another interesting source of how structured light can carry information codes, and how I was actually first introduced to this was when I started to work. I was in a situation where I was traveling a lot, and this was in the early 90s, and I had a laptop. And at that particular time, Dell was manufacturing a laptop in which you could actually transfer files from one laptop to another simply by aligning structured laser beams between the two laptops. So essentially, let's say you have like one laptop, and it's got like a little like portal or a little like light code at the back side of the laptop where you'd normally plug it in, and you had another laptop over here, and it had an opening as well that could transmit light or receive light. All you had to do is basically say, okay, I'm going to transfer a file, kind of like using a zip drive, only this was done with light. So I'm going to transfer a file from this computer to this laptop, and all you do is sort of line up the portals so that they were sort of directly opposite each other, and you can actually see the light, the light beam or the laser light beam transferring, and so it would essentially transfer the file into air, through light, and your files would sort of be beamed over. I can't believe that technology is gone. I have a feeling it was probably either too expensive or it was covered up. I don't know, but either way, it just goes to show you how much information can be simply transferred through light. And that becomes important in our overall development. So again, this was an interesting lesson on the fact that he did say obviously that yes, consciousness can take on many forms, because ultimately it's going to take on the form that's going to best help that consciousness fractal unit learn and evolve and grow, and ultimately help the whole source consciousness how to better evolve its consciousness in the most efficient way. But as this is happening, there's a lot of advancement that can happen to the species with light. And I'm going to get a little bit more into this, so at least now you know the fundamentals that, essentially you can have the physical body has the capacity and the ability to sort of absorb light and ultimately, create sort of a light body around it. But in addition to that, photons have this amazing ability to actually store codes and information that can be passed in to a being and actually cause recoding of the DNA. And that's basically what Dr. Gary Ife was able to prove. So not only did he prove it by changing a frog into a salamander, but he actually used it to heal rats, I believe, in an experiment. So in this particular experiment, he had a control set of rats, and he had rats that he had ingested with something, maybe it was sugar, but it basically put them into a high diabetic state to the point where they were on the verge of death. And, that's obviously not, a nice thing to do for rats, but it, you know, this was, I guess, in the name of science. So essentially, he passed again light through it, and going back to this experiment. So these rats were on the verge of death, highly diabetic, but it was causing, I believe, it was their liver or their kidney to shut down. So it was one of those organs that help regulate diabetes, and I'm not a doctor enough to know which one it is. So it was one of those organs. I think it was the liver. So essentially, as he shone or projected this structured light from the DNA cells of a healthy, controlled rat into those of the unhealthy, on the verge of death rat, into that DNA structure. And essentially, within days, those rats that were on the verge of death started to turn around and essentially moved out of that that sort of death state and became healthy. He basically regrew those organs with new surviving DNA. So that's amazing that light and information codes can be transferred within, in a structured way to different beings, and essentially can start to transfer and evolve the DNA. So this will become important in the next few videos that I do. So with that, I hope that you've learned something, and if you're interested in the content, if it resonates with you, then I encourage you to subscribe and sign up for alerts if you haven't gotten them already, so that you can see when I'm posting new videos. And again, if it doesn't resonate with you, that's fine too. Keep what resonates and discard or leave what doesn't resonate behind. Have a great evening. Thanks. Bye.